The broadcast is now starting. All attendees are in listen-only mode.
Good afternoon, everybody. This is Nicole Hennessy, Vice President of Music Biz. You're welcome to the Common Ground webinar series. Whether this is your first webinar with us or you've been on the series before, thank you for being here today, and we hope the presentation has you walking away with more information on today's topic and ways to implement within your business. Before we dive into the DDEX presentation today, I do want to talk a little bit about some of the happenings here at Music Biz. It's been a great couple of weeks with some announcements, and I just want to take a second to chat about those. Our next big event that we have coming up is Nylon Connect 2020. Nylon, Nylon. The name came from the fact that the event toggles between New York and London. And here in 2020, we'll be in New York from January 16th to January 17th at the Dream Hotel in New York. This is a high-level business development summit drawing the global music industry together at the beginning of the calendar year to have discussions that are going to chart the course for the rest of the year. Some great keynotes and panelists and speakers have been announced so far. Just on Tuesday, we announced that Troy Carter, now of Q&A, will be our finale keynote. We're excited to have Troy in the program. He was added to a line of keynotes that include Cecilia Vist from Spotify, Sun Lee from YouTube, who represents the China and Korea markets, Scott Cohen from Warner Music Group, and there's a number of other great high-level C-suite speakers that will be on this program. So if you haven't before heard of Nylon or checked out what's happening at the 2020 event, it's nylonconnect.com. Check that out. Registration is open, and we'll continue to make announcements over the next couple of weeks. And in May, we have Music Biz 2020, and May seems so far away, but planning's been underway for quite some time now. And last week, we announced our call for presentations. The Music Biz annual conference program is very heavily community sourced, and we asked the industry at large to, submit those topics. Their passion topics, the topics where they can show their expertise and their company's expertise, and really, educate attendees and set agendas, for the coming year. So look for our call for presentations at musicbiz2020.com. Take a look if you have fresh ideas and want to showcase them. Please, submit those through the call for presentations portal, and we'd love to hear from you and what you want on the 2020 program. And last but not least, do want to mention that the Common Ground webinar series takes place most Thursdays. We have a really jam-packed lineup from now through the end of the year. Visit the events tab at musicbiz.org, and we have really a webinar for lots of different folks, whether you are a junior staffer at a label, whether you are a manager, whether you're an artist, there's something there really for everybody. So take a look at that and register and get those on your schedule so you don't miss out. All of our webinars are recorded, so if you're a Music Biz member, you just need your login and password to go to our website, and you can log in and watch recorded webinars from the past there. So without much further ado, I am going to turn the tables over to Mark Isherwood and Niels Rump from DDEX, who are going to talk to you about the newly launched MEAD standard. It's just, the announcement has just been out there for a few days, and we're glad to have them here as a, first time really, talking about this on a large, public facing platform. So I welcome both of you gentlemen to the Common Ground webinar series. Those out in the audience, you can communicate with both Mark and Niels by using the questions box on your screen. Type your questions into there as the guys are going through their presentation. They will be happy to answer your questions as they are received. So type them in there as you have them, and they will make sure they're answered and included in this presentation. So again, thank you all for being here. Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Niels, and I'm going to mute myself and turn it over to you.
Okay, Nicole, thank you very much indeed. This is Mark Isherwood of the DDEX Secretariat, and I'm here with my colleague Niels Rump to talk to you about the new media enrichment and description standard that DDEX has just recently announced. I'm going to basically give a fairly brief overview of DDEX. I imagine most of you on this webinar have some idea of what DDEX does, and then hand the detail off to Niels. As Nicole indicated, we're very happy to ask questions as we go along. So firstly, just to provide a little bit of context, the DDEX standards are really about making communication along the value chain more efficient. And we do that by standardizing 3 elements of that process. One is the actual message format itself, which lays out in the order that everybody agrees all the various fields that pertain to a particular business transaction. And once those formats are done, we then also develop standard choreographies which really set out the order in which communications are expected to take place. So simply, if one company sends a message, it's anticipated that the company that received it will send another message back, and that gets defined in standards as well. And then finally, the actual protocol by which that process of exchange takes place. Up until now, most of that has been around secure FTP sites, and so it's been fairly simple things like directory structures and file naming conventions. But increasingly now, we are moving towards communication through web services, which gets a lot more sophisticated and enables much more computer-to-computer communication. And you will increasingly see that happening over the next year or so. So, in a way, this slide just sums up what I've just said. That we develop the actual message formats, we then specify choreographies around specific business transactions, and then design and standardize the communication protocols as well. Inevitably, over the years, what has also started to come into DDEX's remit is looking at collaboration with other standards organizations in the business, particularly around unique identification, such as ISWC, ISRC, and ISNI. And we frequently try and do work around improving metadata quality by introducing best practice particularly around how the standards get implemented, so that we're getting a consistent form of implementation. DDEX itself is an open not-for-profit membership organization. We have now in excess of 100 members from right across the value chain, including owners and administrators of musical works. So that includes publishers and CMOs for musical works, owners, administrators of sound recordings, so that's labels, distributors and producer and performer CMOs, digital music retailers, all the household names that you would expect, and a number of technology service providers. Those tend to be companies providing services to rights owners, though not exclusively, and more recently, companies who are offering services and tools to the studio community. And that's really happened in the last 4 or 5 years as a result of the RIN standard, the Recording Information Notification Standard. I won't be sidetracked into that now, but I'm sure if you have any questions on that, we can try and answer them. As I've said, DDEX is a membership organization, and the beating heart of the organization is really the full members. They make up the biggest group of all, and they're able to attend all of the various technical working groups we have and the plenary meetings that we hold twice a year. Any of their personnel can be nominated to be a working group chair, and like all of the members, regardless of which category you're in, before we issue a standard, and this applied as much to the MEAD standard as anything else, we have a period of what we call a committee draft, where all the members have the opportunity to comment on that committee draft over a period of 30 days. And it's part of the process of ensuring buy-in before we actually publish a standard. And the membership fees for full members are revenue-based, and those are up there for you to see. I won't list them out now. The other categories of members are charter members. They get exactly the same benefits as the full members, but they also nominate a person to serve as a director on the board. That board is limited to 21 companies and basically represents three categories of membership that I've mentioned already: owners, administrators of musical works, owners, administrators of sound recordings, and then DSPs and tech companies. And then the last group are the associate members. They are not involved in the work. They don't participate in the work in the way in which charter and full members do, but they do have access to quite a lot of the documentation. And as all members, as I've said, they get the opportunity to comment on any committee draft standard that we publish. They are, under certain circumstances, able to attend plenary meetings as well. And a complete list of our members is available on the website at ddex.net. And here is just the list of all the charter members. Most of these, I'm sure, are familiar to you: Musical Work Rights Societies, ASCAP, BMI, GAMA, PRS, and SASM, and SOCAN, and Cobalt Music Publishing. On the recording side, obviously the three major labels, plus PPL, SCPP, and Sound Exchange. And then our service providers are Amazon, Apple, Google, Pandora, Spotify, and Tencent Music. There are obviously a couple of vacancies there for those who are quick at counting, but that's the current board. The other relationships we have are not as tight as a membership relationship, but obviously people who evaluate and implement our standards are our licensees. They take out an implementation license, and we very much encourage licensees to provide feedback on the standards so that we continue to develop and meet the requirements of the business as a whole. And then increasingly important to us are our liaison organizations. These are trade associations or standards bodies. And the purpose of these is, particularly with the trade associations, is to act as a conduit of information between us and the trade associations for their memberships. And MusicBiz is a liaison organization for just that reason. And it means that memberships that may not have the bandwidth to participate in DDEX as members of DDEX at least get some information about what's going on and what we're doing. The relationship with the standards bodies is a little closer, in so much as they do actually attend our technical working groups and plenary meetings, and are able, like the members, to comment on the committee draft standards. And this is very much intended to ensure that all of the standards across the industry remain aligned and are not going off in different directions. All intended to keep everything as interoperable and as straightforward as we can. We currently have 11 of those organizations who are also listed on the DDEX.net website. And the way that we operate, most of the work gets done between technical working groups who usually only meet on telephone conferences with shared documentation. They set the requirements for any work that we have to do, and then review the proposed solutions that the Secretariat, mainly Niels, I have to say, come up with to meet those requirements, and that goes through an iterative process before we eventually issue a standard. And then the events that happen twice a year, plenary meetings, which really are the impetus for every 6 months. So we are meeting at the beginning of November for our 35th plenary meeting in Stockholm, and we rotate them between Europe, East and West Coast of North America. And these very much review all of the work that the working groups are doing, so that everybody is aware what's going on right across the organization. But it's the catalyst for setting work plans out for the next 6 months. And we find these face-to-face meetings very, very important. Meeting on the phone can get you a certain way forward, but even when it comes to technical things like standards, you do need to see the whites of other people's eyes. And the most important thing to stress about all of this is that we work by consensus. Consensus doesn't mean unanimity, although in fairness, most of the time we achieve that. But consensus means that there is no sustained opposition to a particular solution. And that mode of operation is extremely important to DDEX, because it really is the means by which we've managed to bring together a very disparate and often feuding industry together to actually develop standards that everybody's buying into and implementing. So at the moment, we have 6 sort of significant areas of focus in terms of the standards we're developing. There's the release delivery standard, of which MEAD is now a sister standard. The ERN is the release delivery standard. And the MEAD standard has come out of the working group that developed ERN. We have sales and usage reporting, which is the DSR standard. And we will shortly be issuing a sister standard to the DSR standards later in the year. And more of that when the time comes. Works notification and licensing is really focused on the licensing of mechanical rights in the US. That working group's been going for quite a while, and it obviously has its work very, very focused as a consequence of the mechanical licensing collective. And obviously DDEX is in communication around the issues of data communication with all the parties that are going to be involved in the MLC. We then have the acronym conflict with the Mechanical Licensing Collective, in that we have a group called the Music Licensing Companies. This is a name that they've created for themselves, and these are the sound exchanges, the PPLs of this world, those companies that administer rights in sound recordings and for performers. And obviously they need to communicate a lot of data amongst themselves and also with their members, the labels and the performers. The next one is collection of studio metadata, which I've already mentioned, the recording information notification standard. Most of that work at the moment is focused on outreach and encouraging adoption. And then finally, we have one standard we've issued, which can be used to communicate links between works and sound recordings between business partners. It's a very simple paired back standard, but one that we were asked to put together. The key thing about all of this is that whilst all of this may look like very separate activities, all of the standards that come out of these various different areas of activity have huge similarities. They may be put together in slightly different order, but a lot of the grouping of data fields will be familiar and common across all of the standards. So they're rather like building blocks, but you may come out with a slightly different shape for each individual standard, primarily because they're dealing with different business transactions. We are working on conformance across those standards as well, but I'll pass on to that because I want Niels to get to the meat of the MEAD. And we diagrammatically, all those standards can be represented by our version of the London tube map. You can see who is communicating with whom and using which standard. And one other thing that is kind of unseen, but is very much the foundation upon which DDEX is built, is its data dictionary, and it is the mechanism by which all of the parts of the standards are built up, and it is sometimes called a language because basically it's a common set of terms that the whole of the DDEX membership is agreed to, and it kind of acts as a translator from one business partner's data model into DDEX and then out of DDEX into another data model of another business partner. So that's very much the core of what we do and what that supports all of our work. And I would say finally that DDEX is pretty ubiquitous. There's really hardly anybody in the industry not using DDEX. There are a lot of other standards still around, but gradually that is very much changing. So I think now I'm going to hand over to Niels, who will focus much more on the MEAD standard.
Thank you very much, Mark. And let me stress again, if you have any questions, please just ask and we will try to answer them as swiftly as possible. MEAD had its origin about, I would think, 2 years ago when we talked about the different screen sizes that you need to actually give a good user experience to users or to music aficionados who want to listen to music. 10-15 years ago, when the first iPod came around, well, the screen was very small. iPad and mobile phones get better screens, larger screens that you can give more information to consumers and can have a more interaction with the user about the music that you want them to buy or to stream or to rent or whatever the business model may be. Now, the whole thing, of course, falls completely to pieces, if you like, when we're talking about just devices with no screens, the Alexas of this world or the speakers, intelligent speakers. There is nothing that those devices can actually play back to you other than the music that someone has asked for. And in that case, we need to make sure that the artificial intelligence agent that is running on those devices can actually provide the appropriate content back to the user that the user expects. If you ask for a piece of music and you get something else back, that's not a very good user experience. And let's be honest, at the moment, that's quite often what you get, at least in our household. Whenever my daughter asks for something to be played, it's quite often not the right thing that comes back. So we're trying to be able to bring as much information to those artificial intelligence agents to make sure that the devices give the content back that the consumer wants or expects. And there are different kinds of things that you may want to ask them. And it's much more than just, hey, play me this song from that artist. That works quite well. But what happens if you ask Google to play something from Slowhand? In that case, the Google device, or rather the Google database, needs to know that Slowhand is Eric Clapton, and therefore something from Eric Clapton needs to be played. Or if you ask Alexa to play something, or the song NMM sampled in Stan, well, then you want Dido, of course. Or if you want to have something from the female singer or the live version of Don't Give Up, well, you need to find the right track and the right singer. All of that rich information is something that the artificial intelligence needs to get actually the right tracks out. And that is what we're trying to provide. Sorry, I can't see the full question, I'm afraid. Let's just... Classical metadata is a good question. I'll come to that in a moment. And if you want to use classical music with the current agents, that is certainly not very good at times. So, play something from the female singer of the live version of Don't Give Up. Sorry. First of all, you need to have a list of the popular tracks with that title. You need to be able to differentiate between live and studio versions. You need to have the lineups of those tracks, try to identify the prominent singer, and then find another track of that singer, and hopefully you'll be listening to something from Paula Cole. Or another example, play me Ed Sheeran's latest track. Well, what does the latest track mean? It's not always the one that was recently published. It's the one that is most likely being pushed by the record company in the area that you are. So there are some pieces of metadata that needs to be available to the services, which goes way beyond the factual information of what the title is, when it was released, and those kind of things. And that is MEAD. MEAD is a data source to fuel artificial intelligence, and record companies can provide that as part of their supply chain. They can provide either from their marketing systems or from the normal supply chain, online retailers, these systems with the information that they can then use. But you also have third-party metadata providers, whether they're commercial companies, and there are a number of those coming up and starting to become more prominent, but also can be utilities like Music Brains, for example, those kind of things that have huge amounts of information, often crowdsourced. But wouldn't it be good if that information can be used by those services? Because it's the fans of those pieces of music that then maintain those databases, and they provide rich information that can help there. So all of those things is what we want to do, or to enable. How can this then be communicated? Well, the first is it can go from labels to DSPs. That can be done in a normal ERN feed. It would be done either via FTP or web services, and I'll talk about that, how that will look in a minute. And the basic idea is when you know how an ERN feed looks like, it's an XML file with all the metadata in it that describes the release as well as the resources, and linked to it are the individual resource files, the MP3s or AACs or whatever the codec may be. Well, the MEAD file is simply yet another file that is being attached to the ERN message, and the ERN message will then simply say, oh, by the way, here's another file that contains some richer metadata that goes beyond the factual information that the ERN message can provide. But it can also be communicated as part of an extra feed where basically the label is a third-party metadata provider. Again, it can be done via FTP or via web services, but it doesn't need to be triggered by the delivery of an ERN. So a record company that may want to provide information to its DSPs might have some kind of an extra feed where DSPs can simply see what type of information the label is providing on an ongoing basis. And whenever there is something new about an artist that they learn about, or that they collect new images for that artist from the latest tour or whatever it may be, well, it would then be part and available of this separate feed. But it can also be from metadata providers. As I said, a label is, in that sense, potentially just another metadata provider. And again, a DSP there could subscribe, if you like, to a specific feed, and which then can be delivered using FTP, or secure FTP rather, through a request message and a reply with this then the MEAD message. So the initial discussions were held in autumn, and we had a meeting in Toronto in one of our plenaries. And we had a good discussion with about, well, certainly 150 people from all kinds of people from our plenary, from record companies, online retailers, the whole width of the membership, as Mark has explained, took part in that. And we kind of agreed a goal, gathered the requirements of what we wanted to achieve, and we started to develop the technical specification, collected samples and looked at the samples and refined the specification. And we went through the whole process that Mark explained. We had a committee draft earlier in this early summer, and now in the autumn we have published this as what we call a candidate standard. We call it a candidate standard because we haven't yet seen real life implementations where people have used the standard, which is, we are not 100% sure that it all works exactly the right thing. Yes, we have made samples and shared them, but they were hand cranked, not automatically generated. So as soon as we're getting real world implementations, we expect that standard to be moved to a formal DDEX standard, version 1.1 most likely, maybe with some additional features, maybe with a couple of bugs fixed. But I'd like to stress that the standard is ready to be implemented. We are fairly confident that it is fit for purpose. When we looked at the whole specification, we thought about two different modes. There is a proactive mode, as I would call it, and a database mode. The proactive mode is where the record company, for example, or a metadata service provider, sends a MEAD file to a DSP proactively. They send it out, and there is nothing that the DSP specifically needs to do. They can simply receive that information. The other mode, which may actually be more in the long run more interesting than the proactive mode, I think at least, that's where a database or a metadata provider basically provides an API to its information, to its data. And through that, then DSPs will be able to query them on specific items. Why does a DSP need to provide all the biographies for all the artists that they have if there may be a metadata provider that collects and specializes in biographies? So when a consumer wants to see the biography of a specific artist, well, they can pull that information directly from that database. They don't need to have that information locally. Clearly, the big artists, they would cache that information, but for more obscure artists, I don't think it's necessary. Now, we have focused on the proactive mode initially, but I would expect the database mode to be added. I just see a question here from Jody. What does ERN stand for? ERN is the electronic release notification. That's the standard that is used by pretty much all major record companies to send to their DSP partners the products and all the release and resource information. So I answered that
by email. There's also a question from Adrian, which I also answered by email. Which creator credits would creator credits be transferred via ERN or MEAD? The answer is it depends on which creator credit data you're actually talking about. The normal day-to-day, what I tend to call rights management stuff, which would be going to a DSP, that would usually be ERN. But if it's more information like which film did this track appear in, or how many Grammys has this artist won, and that would normally be using MEAD. That's the distinction that we generally make, although there's no hard and fast rules about it.
Indeed. So, Michelle, but your classical question, I'll hope to come to that in a moment. So, as I said, there are two different ways in which we can deal with communicating MEAD at the moment. The first is it's sent alongside the ERN message, where you simply add just another file to an product feed, to an ERN feed, where then in ERN4, the current version of ERN of the ERN standard, you can then point to that MEAD file and saying, hey, here is some extra information. It's for the older standard of ERN, which was developed before MEAD was even thought about. We have an alternative way in which that can be done there as well. Mark said at the beginning that more and more people looking at ditching FTP and using web services as a more sophisticated and a much more easier to integrate into fluid supply chains approach. And yes, we do the same thing here. There is a symmetric and an asymmetric system. The symmetric one, where you have the release distributor, which is DDEX's name for a record company, and then you, the DSP, and the metadata provider, which is for example, a record company, where the DSP would subscribe to a specific feed, and whenever a new piece of information is available for the item that the DSP has asked about, for example, give me information about Ed Sheeran. Whenever there's new information about Ed Sheeran, it would then be sent to the web service of the DSP. So the DSP just sits there, has sent off all of its requests, and receives the information whenever something new comes available. They can then decide what to do with it, whether they want to take it, or maybe they're not interested and they can throw it away and can unsubscribe if they want to. I expect that the asymmetric one will be much more popular, at least for the ERN world. It is more popular than the symmetric one, where basically only the metadata provider has to provide a web service. The DSP does not. Now that means that the DSP is the one who has always to query. And there's a process there by which you can first of all ask for a subscription, like in the previous case, and you then get a subscription ID back. And then on a regular basis, you basically say, hey, do you have any new information for me? and you would get back, the DSP would get back an atom feed, which is basically an RSS on steroids, get back an atom feed which contains all the information that that DSP has new. And you can then go through this and select as a DSP which bits of information you want, and those you can then specifically ask for. So the RSS feed or the atom feed is it's basically a table of contents of what's new, and then the DSP can ask what information they want. So the big question now is, what does this message all allow to communicate? And don't worry, we'll not go over lots of pointy brackets and XML. But I'll just show you this diagram here, which is the high level of the message. All our messages have one message header, and then there's a whole raft of different bits of information that can be communicated. And it is a big message. If you're creating a proper documentation out of the XML, that'll have a couple of hundred pages, I would suspect. But let's start by looking at this piece here, the party information. If you want to receive information about a specific party, that piece of information or that composite there, that XML structure will be filled in. You will have information such as the name of the party that you're talking about. It is Ed Sheeran. You may get all the identifiers that the sender of the MEAD message knows, whether that's a Music Brains ID, whether that's an ISNI, whether that's an IPI number, whether it's an IPN number, all the different identifiers, proprietary identifiers that they may have collected. All of that information will be provided in there. But apart from that, it's also the actual information that people are interested in. The nickname of the artist, the charting information, if that's what the metadata provider provides. So where was that artist, with which recording, in which charts? Biographies of that artist, photographs of that artist that are not directly linked to an artist, so not cover art, that would come as part of the product feed, but photographs from a tour or those kind of things.
Niels, before you go on, there's a sort of accumulation of questions here. How does MEAD manage languages? I think there's a slide for that later on, isn't there?
Yes.
Where can we find the standard definitions for each of the 35 MEAD data types?
The specification, well, we should have actually had a slide on that one. If you go to kb.ddex.net, KB stands for knowledge base, in there you will get, I will actually, KB, there you can actually, you see a list of items. One of them will be the MEAD or media description and media enrichment and description. And there you find the standard, both the text of the standard that describes the choreography and the web services, as well as the XSDs that provide you a list with all the stuff that the message can do.
And then how prevalent is the use of the asymmetric and symmetric web services today? Are the big release distributors set up to do this?
I don't know is the honest answer. I do know that a lot of them are starting to go down that route. I would still think that FTP is the most used way of doing that. But it is the record companies, the major record companies, that actually were very, very keen in standardizing these web services choreography. So I assume that they would go down that route. I would say it's worth asking them. Go to them and saying, hey, do you support it? And you may be surprised, and some of them will say yes.
And then there's another one, is there a MEAD template available yet? And there's a comment that this slide looks close, but is there anything else we can provide?
Depends on what you mean by template. There is an XML schema definition which gives you the exact syntax and structure that you need to adhere to make a valid XML file or a valid MEAD file. That is available from the knowledge base. Good. So we were talking about the party information. So that's all that information. The one thing that I haven't talked about is that this focus information. What when you ask Alexa or any of the other systems to play me the latest Ed Sheeran track, well, you need to know which is Ed Sheeran's latest track, or the system needs to know which is Ed Sheeran's latest track. Well, that's the focus track. That information needs to be communicated, or is communicated, in there. Work information, well, that's the musical work, that's the composition. What are we talking about here? Where has a work been used? Are there any other works that are related to this work? Is there some influence between different works? Of course, who wrote the song and those kind of thing as well. But also work hierarchy about classical information. And this comes back to the question that, who was it who asked the question about classical? Classical information, or classical music, has been a problem in the sense that lots of DSPs have not been able to properly display classical music. Quite often the composer name gets wrapped into the title and those things, or quite often the composer is one of the recording artists, or at least that's how it appears to be. The DDEX standards can properly handle and disambiguate all of those functions. That applies both to the ERN standard as well as the MEAD standard. The MEAD standard goes significantly further in that you can also talk about what type of what's the form of a piece of music. Is it a concerto? Is it an opera? Is it a lied? All those things can be communicated. What's the key note? What's the time signature? And all of those kind of things can be communicated in MEAD. I really hope that once this information, once there is a standard to communicate this information in a structured way, that record companies will start actually providing that information in a structured way, and at the same time, then DSPs will be able to use that information in a structural way, so that you don't get this well, hodgepodge of information on some of the services, which is not very good. But in the end, it is a question of on the one hand, value, how much money is available in order to clean the data up, and how much willingness is there to clean the data up. The structures are now there to communicate the data in an appropriate way. I hope that answers that question, at least partly.
There's a couple more coming, Niels, sorry.
No, go ahead.
What DSPs are using or say they will use the MEAD standard? Again, we probably don't know, do we?
No, we don't know, but all the big DSPs that are using the ERN standard, they have pretty much all worked on this and have input, have put their requirements on it and have provided samples and so forth. So I expect them to work towards it. Will they have it by now? No, they won't. But I think they're all very, very key, especially those that have smart speakers in their portfolio. I think they will want to use this rather earlier than later, especially for the focus track information, because they've been screaming for this feature for quite a while.
And is a list of attribute relations available on the knowledge base?
Yes, that again, that's part of the XSD. There's also a data dictionary. You can all, when you're going on the right place on the knowledge base, follow the link to the MEAD standard. On the right hand side, there is a box that gives you the data dictionary as well as the XML schema definition. If not, send us an email at info@ddex.net and we will help you find it.
I know there's only 2 or 3 slides left, but I'm just sort of better give you a time warning.
Yeah, no, I see that. And I'll actually, oops, what's going on? So this is a list of the fields on a very, very high level that we've talked about. Focus track, we talked about that. Influence and similarity, similar works. Those things are starting to become what I would call journalistic content. That's not factual, but those are things where metadata companies can actually provide real additional value that can hopefully help music consumers find new music and get a better experience. Charting and awards, vocal register, very important for classical music. Where used, we talked about. Time signature, harmonic signatures, mood, style, genre, theme, those kind of things. The text of the lyrics, wouldn't that be great if it's there? Yes, there are licensing concerns there, but at least the information can be provided as part of the MEAD standard. Alternative titles, nicknames, classical work hierarchies, and so forth. Now, all the free-form information in here can be accompanied by pronunciation information. Not only that, but it's also can be made country specific. So you can provide different lyrics or different nicknames for a specific artist for different territories. If somebody is known one way in Germany and another way in France, you can provide that information. And you can provide pronunciation information, especially important for those intelligent speakers, that they can both listen to someone saying an artist's name as well as pronounce it. And also important there is the ability not to provide the correct pronunciation, but also to communicate common mispronunciations or common misspellings. So all of those things can be accommodated.
A couple more questions.
Can we hold on, because that's okay. The last slide, and then we'll do the questions.
All right.
So where are we? MEAD 1.0 has been published, can be implemented, and we know that some companies are doing it now. I'm getting questions from them and saying, hey, how is this meant, and so forth. So we know that people are implementing it. And once we've got feedback, we will then update the specification to become a DDEX standard. And now we can do the rest of the questions.
Yeah, there's one. When will digital music retailers begin accepting the MEAD messages? I think Niels has just touched on that, really. We know that work is going on, but as the Secretariat, we don't actually know who is committed to doing implementations. We can guess, but clearly they wouldn't have spent a lot of time getting involved in the actual meetings that develop this standard if they weren't interested in subsequently implementing it. So hopefully soon is the answer.
Yeah.
What does resource refer to here?
Resource is a sound recording or a video, music video. So we basically, all the messages are structured in describing musical works, sound recordings, and music videos and other resources, and then the release, which is basically the package, the wrapping of all of those resources that then make up the product once you slap a price on it.
And can you please share a more specific link with the attribute definitions? We're looking for the semantic definitions of each of the 35 fields, not just the name.
First of all, I think there are significantly more than 35, but again, there is the data dictionary. I think we will, maybe the best thing is to share this via Nicole.
Yeah.
We can provide you with a link which tells you exactly where the stuff is.
And then do you have a timeline deadline by which you want feedback on MEAD 1 to create the next version? And no is the answer, but if you've got comments, then we gladly receive them. We are meeting, there is a meeting in, a plenary meeting in Stockholm at the beginning of November, where I think we'll probably start thinking about a timeline for actually doing work. But if you've got comments on it already, then we very much welcome receiving those as soon as possible.
Yeah, I can't see us doing the next version this time around. That is more or less out of the question.
Oh, no, I didn't mean that.
No, I understand. But even if we're creating 1.1 and you have a comment thereafter, that doesn't mean, I think MEAD, even more so than ERN, which is developing and changing over time, will be added to a great deal over time. So I can see that specification growing significantly over the next years to come, because there are more and more pieces of rich information that people would want to share with one another. We have still a whole bucket of stuff that we have postponed and we didn't put in 1.0 that we might want to put in 1.2, 1.3, 2.0, who knows?
And then is there a list of third-party metadata providers on the DDEX site? No, that there isn't, but the sorts of companies we mean by that term are GraceNote and TiVo and Music Brains potentially. So anybody that's specializing in that sort of area is what we mean by that phrase. So I think we're bang on time. That's very clever. Unless there are any more questions. Thank you for the good wishes from people. Unless there are any more questions, I don't know, Nicole, have you anything more you wish to say?
This is Henrik Bick speaking. Just want to thank you both, Mark and Niels, for today's presentation. Thanks for everyone who showed up today, and thank you for all who participated by asking questions. For the couple of you that submitted questions that are looking for some follow-up, we'll make sure to do so by email.
Yeah, we're happy to do that.
All right. Thank you so much for attending.
Thank you all. Thank you. Enjoy the rest of your day.
Thank you very much.
Thanks. Bye.